Well, I hope you all had a great weekend, and hope your your Monday is starting off pretty good here today. Wonderful to continue to be in this Easter season as we celebrate the victory and the joy that we have in Jesus Christ, and what a great joy it is to be here with you guys once again. Today I've entitled my message for this week, Appearances, and it's good for us, I think, to just take a moment during this Easter season to think back to the appearances that Jesus made. It's so important because Jesus wanted to make sure he left no doubt when he ascended back into heaven after 40 days after the resurrection that he was alive, that it was him, that he was physically alive, raised from the dead. And we have several instances of Jesus talking about these things in the Gospels. Number one, yesterday in church, we heard the story of Thomas. Very familiar story for many of you probably. As you know, the Easter night, Jesus appears to the disciples, and everyone, all of them except Thomas, is in the upper room, and they're afraid, they're fearful, and Jesus comes and appears to them and says, peace be with you, and touch me and see that it's me, and they rejoice. And what do? They go back and tell Thomas, we've seen the Lord, and Thomas says, unless I see the nail marks and put my finger into the nail marks and put my hand into his side, I will never believe. And then, of course, a week later, Jesus shows up once again where the disciples at. Thomas is with them this time. And he goes and turns to Thomas and says, Thomas, come here. And he proves it to him. See, touch, put your finger in the nail marks, put your hands in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe. And then Thomas proclaims, my Lord and my God, realizing that it's Jesus. The Apostle Paul talks about several appearances that Jesus made that aren't necessarily recorded in the Gospels, but that Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. He talks about that he appeared to the disciples, which we hear about in the Gospels. We hear that Jesus later on appeared to Jesus' half-brother James. And then eventually that Jesus appeared to more than 500 people at one time. Paul says most of whom who are still living, though some have fallen asleep, meaning that some had already died. But most of those 500 who were still alive. And Paul is trying to get across to people, hey, this is what happened. Jesus proved over and over again that he's alive. And there's a lot of people who want to doubt the resurrection, and did during Jesus' time. I mean, we see that the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, had the Romans go spread this message that the disciples stole his body, and that's continued to be a charge against Christians today. Oh, well, the women went to the wrong tomb, or the disciples stole the body, or on and on. Jesus didn't really die, but he fainted, and he was revived, and he walked out of the tomb himself. And on the list goes of people trying to discredit the resurrection. Why? Well, as we talked about last week, if Jesus is not alive, then our faith is useless. The resurrection is the thing that points to Jesus truly being the Son of God. He proved it, that he is the Son of God by rising from the dead. And that's what Jesus is trying to get at. And, nowhere has there ever been 500 people. And some people say, those 500 guys, they were all hallucinating. There's never been a time where 500 people have hallucinated the same exact thing. So you're wanting Christians to believe that these 500 people all hallucinated the exact same thing of Jesus being alive at the same time. It just goes beyond logic. It's harder to believe. It's hard to believe that. Okay. So on and on the list goes. And this coming Sunday, we get to hear once again about an appearance from Jesus as Jesus walks with those two disciples on the road to Emmaus. And what an amazing conversation that they had, and what a great appearance that is from Jesus as well to these two men. So we look at these different appearances. What does that mean for us? Well, once again, it proves that Jesus is the Son of God, that he rose from the dead, and that he showed himself over and over and over and over again that he's alive. You know, it would have been hard to believe, and hard to believe we'll just take one person's word for it, but that's not what Jesus did. He reinforced it time and time again, wanted to make sure he left no doubt that he was alive, that he was raised physically from the dead. And it gives us hope that Jesus is going to raise us from the dead as well someday. You know, we all struggle at times with doubting, trusting that the promises of God are truly real, and at times truly for us. And you know, it just goes to show Jesus in that story with Thomas that he truly cared about Thomas. He said, "Thomas, I know you're struggling. Come here. Come here. I want to show you. I want to prove to you that I'm alive." And what does Thomas do? He proclaims, "My Lord and my God." He trusts. He put his faith in Jesus and believes in him. And you know, brothers and sisters, that is the kind of response that God wants us to have. Those disciples, when they had heard that when they saw and touched that Jesus is alive, what did they do? They went and told Thomas, "We've seen Jesus. He's alive." And Thomas struggled with that. And we want to go out and tell people that Jesus is alive. And people are going to struggle with it. People are going to have a hard time believing. What? This guy really rose from the dead? It's going to be hard for them to believe. And that's why we've got to bring the word of Christ to them. We've got to bring Jesus to them, that they can experience his love and his grace, and they can really have that word of truth spoken to them. And as that happens, God is going to do amazing things in their lives. And people struggle, and people are going to have a hard time, but I'm going to really encourage you, don't give up on people. Don't give up. Continue to encourage them. Continue to pray for them. Continue to invite them to come and hear these wonderful promises of God. You know, these appearances from Jesus have been amazing, and just once again show us that Jesus is alive, that we have victory and we have hope, not in a dead person, but someone who is alive and proved to be who he is. And that's why we celebrate during this Easter season and every day of our lives, because of the victory that Jesus has won for us, and the hope that we live with each and every day. So I'd encourage you, as you ponder the appearances of Jesus this week, just think about those things and just celebrate the continued victory that we have in Jesus Christ. Just pray that God would bless your week today and this week.